In this video, we're going to show you how to unlock true joy, share with you 2 common ways that you, me, and all of us sabotage our joy, and finally, I'm going to give you the one ultimate key to live a life filled with joy. According to ChatGPT, here are the top 10 most annoying things. From loud chewing to people who don't use their turn signals, this list has it all. Do you see any that really get under your skin? Let us know down in the comments. But why do these things annoy us so much? Have you ever thought about that? Well, it's because they inconvenience us. They knock us out of our normal rhythm. They make us go out of our way or jump through hoops. From ChatGPT's list, it's gotta be slow internet for me. Give us a like if you agree. But there's one thing an AI couldn't come up with, and that I'm sure you haven't had to deal with recently: a broken car door handle. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, just a broken car door handle? That doesn't sound that bad. Oh, it's bad. Over the summer, out of nowhere, the door handle on my car just stopped working. Now, in order to get into the car, I have to open the passenger side door and climb all over the seats and get into the driver's seat, instead of just like a normal person going through the driver's door. It's really annoying and quite embarrassing when you're in public and people start looking at you like you're crazy. Because it's broken, I've had to have another step of getting into my car, which gets really annoying over time, especially when it's blazing hot outside. I'm so used to having handles on all the doors of my car like a normal person, so this has been a major inconvenience for me. But here's the thing, we are all going to experience things that inconvenience us, which are out of our control, but what is in our control is the way that we respond. It might surprise you to know that the Bible talks about this. In Philippians 2, the Apostle Paul addresses one of the most common ways we typically respond to inconveniences in our lives. In verse 14, he writes, "Do everything without grumbling or arguing." Now, what exactly does it mean to grumble? Grumbling simply means to complain in a bad-tempered way. And if we're being honest, we've all done it. And this is the first way we sabotage our joy, by complaining. Did you know that the Israelites, and if you've been around church, you know that the entire Old Testament of our Bible is about the Israelites, they were also guilty of this? In Exodus 16, right after God delivered them from slavery in Egypt, they say this: "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death." Now that's a complaint if I've ever heard one. Granted, they are faced with a huge dilemma by not having food in the wilderness, but instead of trusting God to provide, they complained and even accused God of trying to starve them. Do you think that the people who are saying they would rather have died than face their current circumstances are defined by joy? Absolutely not. It's easy to see the fault of the Israelites, but I too am guilty of complaining. When I had to climb through the passenger side of my car in the 100-degree heat because of my broken car door handle, I complained about it constantly. And in the grand scheme of things, it was only a tiny little inconvenience. However, I complained so much that my broken door handle became all I was thinking about. Just like the Israelites, when I was complaining, my life was completely depleted of joy. What about you? Do you complain when you experience inconveniences in your life? Those kind of things that knock you off your normal rhythm and just drain you? I want you to know that it is incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to be joyful while you are complaining. Paul continues in Philippians 2 by showing us why we shouldn't complain. In verse 15, he says, "So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky." Here lies the second way we sabotage our joy, by not living out of our true identity. For those of us who have chosen to place our faith in Jesus and follow him, we are called children of God. However, before Jesus came to the earth to live the perfect life and die on the cross for us so that we may be saved from our sin, God chose a people to be set apart from the world as his chosen people. They were to be the vehicle through which he revealed himself and blessed all of the nations of the earth. This people happened to be the very Israelites who we just saw complaining against God and failing to trust him to provide. The very people that were called by God to be set apart and a blessing to the nations were looking just like everyone else. They had forgotten their identity as God's people. Now, it may be easy to stop here, point the finger at Israel and say, "How could you?" But don't we do the same exact thing? As Christians, we are called to be set apart from this world around us that is lost. But when we are complaining and arguing, we look just like the world and nothing like our true identity. If you have chosen to follow Jesus, your true identity is a child of God. You are more than a student, you are more than a son or a daughter, and you are more than any title or label that someone can place on you. You are His. And when you are His, you can be filled with joy no matter what comes your way, because the God of the universe who created everything knows and loves you. Despite your imperfections, despite what little you bring to the table, you are His. And when you live out of this true identity, you will have joy that makes you stand out. As Paul says, you will shine among the world like stars in the sky, illuminating everyone you pass because of your joy. Does your life look like this? When we sabotage our joy by complaining and not living out our true identity, we leave a lot on the table. Unfortunately, instead of choosing to trust God and live out their identity as His people, the Israelites continue to complain, which sabotaged their joy, as we've seen. God provided for them time and time again, despite their complaining, but every time they forgot how He had just provided for them. They had spiritual amnesia. Like Dory in Finding Nemo, forgetting what Marlin had said over and over again, the Israelites forgot what God had just done for them at the sight of a new inconvenience. But our lives can look like this too. When I continue to complain about my broken door handle and having to climb over a seat to get in my car, I focused more and more on that inconvenience and totally forgot about all the amazing ways God had provided for me. He had given me this car to get around, a beautiful, amazing wife, a place to live, an awesome new job at the church, but all of that faded into the background the second I started complaining. Like Dory forgetting over and over, I kept forgetting God's goodness because I kept focusing on my complaints. You might be surprised to know that the Israelites' continual complaining led to unbelief that actually kept their first generation out of the land that God had promised to give them. They left so much on the table because they couldn't stop complaining. So my question for you is this: what are you leaving on the table by not living a life of joy? Paul ends this passage in verses 17 and 18 by saying, "But even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me." A drink offering in the Old Testament was an act of worship and symbolized the dedication of a person in worship to God. Paul takes this a step further by saying that his entire life is a drink offering poured out in service to God. He says that he can rejoice and be glad, not because his circumstances are comfortable. He literally wrote this from prison. He has joy because his life and service are an act of worship to God. Everything he did was for God's glory, not for himself or to live comfortably. Here we find the ultimate key to living a life filled with joy. Lasting joy is found in serving God and living for Him rather than living for your own comfort. Everything Paul did was done in service to the Lord. His life was a drink offering offered up to God. Now, what would it take for your life to look like this? Like a drink offering to God? What steps do you need to take to serve God and live for Him rather than your own comfort? I want to issue to you a challenge to take on this week to help you live out a more joy-filled life. I call it the Cut Out Complaining Challenge. What I want you to do is do your absolute best to go a week without complaining. Anytime you come across a broken door handle situation and you feel the urge to complain, be intentional to stop it before it comes out and remember your identity as a child of God. Try it this week and see what just might happen.